Cut Block Podcast, where we cut through the noise and keep it real. Just because a cut block is legal doesn't make it right. Kind of like Corey Hogue's takes. Now, here's your host, Corey Hogue.
Thank you, Jesse, and welcome to the Cut Block Podcast. This week, we're cutting through the noise and giving you an update about Texas A&M Texarkana's expedited search for a head coach. That we head into the Gridiron Briefing Room, where I'm joined by managing editor of True to the Crew, D3Football.com contributor. He's a proprietor of D3 WBB Scoop on Substack, Riley Zayas, to discuss the second meeting of Hardin Simmons and Mary Hardin Baylor and take a look at the playoff hopes for other Texas teams in the Southern Athletic Association and the Southern Collegiate Athletic Association. And of course, we wrap things up with the weekend warm-up. It's my personal viewing schedule for the weekend. My name is Corey Hogue, and I am proprietor of CoreyHogueSports.substack.com. You can find me on your favorite social media channels and Substack, wherever. Just search CORYHOGUE Sports. And don't forget, like and subscribe and review this podcast wherever you listen. And you can find every episode on the cutblock.podbean.com as well as on my Substack page. I want to thank you all for your support. It's time to go in the trenches. And, you know, I don't toss around the word ambitious lightly, but that's exactly what Texas A&M Texarkana just laid on the table. And ambitious. Disciplined sprint to hire the first head coach in school history and build a football program that can win. Not a club team, not a placeholder, a program. And the runway is clear. First kick is in 2027. Here's what I'm hearing from multiple sources and why it matters. Interest in the job, it's not just warm, man. It's on a boil. More than 150 applications were reviewed. The initial wave has now been narrowed down to 12, and the interviews, first round and second round, or first round will begin next week, and they're planning 2 rounds of interviews, all scheduled between November 11th and November 21st, with the goal of announcing a hire in the first week of December. You can get all the information that you need on my Substack on the piece put out this morning. You will want to find that and see it. It is for paid subscribers. It will be free later on towards the weekend. That is a story you definitely want to read. It's a tight timeline, and it's intentional. And it's a signal that TAMUT isn't dabbling. They're treating this like a launch, not an experiment. Now, the profile matters. Sources indicate the Eagles are targeting coaches with NCAA Division II experience. Well, and that makes sense. You know, the Eagles are expected to accept an invitation to join the Lone Star Conference. And if that happens, and all indications say it will, you don't want a learn-on-the-job staff. You want people who know what the league's terrain is on day one. So at least 3 of the coaches of the 12 are current LSC assistant coaches, and 1 more is a current NJCAA head coach in that group. And that tells me they want familiarity with the recruiting footprint, the week-to-week trench fights in the Lone Star Conference, and the realities of a D2 roster management. They don't want any guesswork. So let's talk resources. Because intention without investment is just a press release. TAMUT expects to be fully funded, especially with scholarships, is what I'm hearing. That's an immediate advantage over a number of programs in the Lone Star Conference. Fully funded at 36 means math gets real. You can build depth on the line of scrimmage. You can carry specialists and weather freshmen making mistakes without torpedoing an entire season. And staffing, they're going to have a nice, robust staff. It's looking like they're going to have at least 8 full-time, some part-time assistants, and 2 grad assistants. And, you know, it's functional. It's a functional operation. That's enough hands to recruit and develop while you're installing culture, academics, and strength and conditioning from a dead stop. And yes, they need a home, and they're going to have one. Plans call for Red River Credit Union Stadium on campus to be ready for the 2028 season. We went over this last week, but again, picture a bowl-style venue for roughly 6,000 people with club and VIP areas and an artificial surface. It's not just about seats. That's about an experience on Saturday, and that's how you sell donors, recruits, parents, transfers, that this is real and it's permanent. And if you're asking, but Corey, the team starts in 2027. What about year one? Think of 2027 as your road and temporary era and 2028 as your statement, the permanent footprint in the Ark-La-Tex region. So how does this ripple through the Lone Star Conference? 3 quick ways. First, recruiting geography. Texarkana is a unique doorway. East Texas, North Texas, Dallas, Fort Worth, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Southern Oklahoma. If you're fully funded, they can be aggressive on high school recruiting and in the transfer portal. So expect early wins with some offensive linemen and edge players who want immediate snaps in a new program. Second, culture and identity. Launch programs can't be everything at once. The right coach will declare a brand early, maybe tempo or spread, maybe trench first with play action, but whatever it is, it's got to match the roster they can sign in the first 2 cycles. And third, scheduling and perception. Year 1 is about competence and growth. Year 2 is about proof of concept inside your own stadium. If they pick the right head coach, you'll see a clean operation fast. Organized special teams, situational discipline, and a roster that looks older than the birth certificate says because it's layered with JUCO players and transfer portal pieces around a freshman core. So let's talk about the chair everyone wants, the head coach. What should Texas A&M, Texarkana prioritize? Obviously, you want some Division II fluency. The Lone Star Conference has its own weather systems, right? Literally and figuratively. You need someone who understands scholarship splits, the grind of the regional rankings, and travel math. You want build-out experience. Has this coach built a room from nothing, recruited to a promise instead of a trophy case, hired a staff that likes to recruit? That's different than taking over a 6-5 team. Portal discipline. Not portal mania, portal discipline. Year 1 and 2 require plug-and-play grown men in key positions. You cannot skip 2 high school classes and expect year 3 to hold. Strength and conditioning and player development. New programs don't beat people with scheme alone. They beat them with bodies that finish four quarters and a 2-deep that doesn't melt in November. Then you need community buy-in. The coach will be the face. They have to be the face. Fundraising breakfast, high school coaching clinics. Yes, selfies on the concourse. You need someone who can win over the fans, win the press conference, win over the fans, and then win on the field. If they do that, Texarkana will get behind this. And they if they feel it, they will definitely show up. So let me sketch a roadmap for you, kind of. December 2025, they're looking to announce the head coach. He hires core staff pretty quick, including coordinators and guys who can recruit. Winter and spring 2026, they build the roster foundation. They get high school class number 1, early portal, junior college pieces. They get that strength and conditioning baseline going. Summer, fall of 2026, install some systems, continue talent acquisition, and brand your identity in the community. Get out there, be seen, be a face, let them know. 2027 season is a launch. You measure success by competence, penalties, special teams, fourth quarter stamina, and close game execution. Then 2028, they open Red River Credit Union Stadium. Now you're selling momentum. It's no longer a blueprint. It's no longer an idea or something you see building. It is there. And that's when you can jump a tier if development proceeds as planned. But none of this, absolutely none of it, works without alignment from administration, fundraising, admissions, compliance, facilities, the head coach, the athletic director, all pulling in the same direction. The accelerated interview window and the scholarship commitments indicate alignment is present. The rest is hiring the right voice and then letting that person cook. Look, I'm going to keep working the phone lines as the interviews begin next week and running through November 21st. If the timelines holds, we could be discussing the first head coach in program history for the Eagles sometime around the second week of December, and what that hire reveals about year 1 and year 2. So stay locked in here. I'll have updates and deeper dives, including staff trees, recruiting targets, and a closer look at the stadium plan on my Substack as this project moves forward. And if you're in the Arklatex region, get ready. Saturdays are coming to Texarkana. And that's in the trenches. We're going to get to the Gridiron Briefing Room with Riley Zayas in a moment. But first, I want to let you know the Cut Block podcast is listener supported. If you have the means, I'd be honored to have you as a paying subscriber over at CoreyHogueSports.substack.com, CORYHOGUE Sports. Paid subscribers get every story delivered right to their inbox. Annual subscribers get 6 months free. And founding members, you're my all-stars in reality. You receive early access to posts that are non-breaking news, plus my undying love and gratitude. It's time to head into the Gridiron Briefing Room, and I'm pleased to be joined by the managing editor of True to the Crew. He's a D3Football.com contributor and proprietor of D3 WBB Scoop, Division III women's basketball, for those of you non-only football people, on Substack. Definitely give him a follow. It's Riley Zayas. Riley, thank you so much for being on the podcast today, man.
Absolutely, Corey. Really excited to talk some, Texas non-FBS D3 football here and be back on other podcasts with you. It's always good to sit down and have some of these conversations, especially late in the year, like we are right now with, playoff implications and conference titles on the line here as we head into this weekend.
We used to have a podcast together a few years ago on the Dave Campbell's network, I believe, or maybe it was, I can't remember. I've been on so many different things through the years, but that was always fun. I always enjoyed that, and we'd go head to head on those games, man. It was always so close and so fun. And if you don't follow Riley, find him everywhere. Riley Zayas, True to the Crew, the Substack. You want to follow him because he gives you everything, and especially for basketball, for women's basketball, that gets very, very little coverage. He's got the best for that, and I don't do basketball anymore, so I will point you straight to him all the time for that.
Hey, I appreciate that. It's great. This is kind of that crossover season, right, where we got some of the best parts of the football season, things coming down to the wire, playoffs right around the corner, and we got basketball tipping off here. Division III season tips off on Friday evening, so this is a busy time for me, but I always enjoy it.
Oh, it is. Yeah, this is that as the fall season starts to head to playoffs and the winter season starts a season. This is, and there's one of those in the spring too. It's crazy. So thank you so much for taking the time. Let's get into this. We're going to talk all things Division III with Texas, but I want to start with, I call it the Baptist battle, the Baptist bloodbath, whatever you want, however you want to refer to this now. It's round 2, Hardin-Simmons and Mary Hardin-Baylor. When you rewatch the first meeting this year, what is one thing that most clearly swung it in HSU's way? Is it like trench play, tempo, situational type discipline?
I think, yeah. It was a combination of all three, to be completely honest. I think Hardin-Simmons on both sides of the ball and on special teams was just the more aggressive team, and they wanted it more. You could tell in the way that they went about it. But I'll say, too, if there was one thing that really stood out to me, and I was there in Abilene watching it from the press box and a little bit from field level, it was the trench play. It was the play up front, and specifically it was Hardin-Simmons' defensive front, putting pressure. UMHB started Seth Mauser at quarterback that day. That was his first start. He had played in the previous games, but that was his first time starting. Facing that Hardin-Simmons defense, as we all know, is just a completely different animal compared to some of the other defenses that UMHB had played. And they played some good ones. But Hardin-Simmons came after him and put pressure, and that caused a lot of disruption in terms of the passing game. Then you try to run the ball, and the run game is really going nowhere. And a lot of that is, again, Hardin Simmons being in position, and they were so correctly positioned for a lot of these reads that UMHB wasn't able to get much going on the plays that even typically, given way to some explosive plays in previous games. Again, this was an offense heading into that game that had really struggled. But I think what we saw from Hardin Simmons that day was just a team that is so well versed in how to play together. There's a lot of seniors. There's a lot of guys on that group that have experience. And I think that showed itself most because up front, and as we know too, with Hardin Simmons' offensive line, they're just very, very good in their line play. And that can swing a lot of games in their favor. If you start to look at the way Hardin Simmons has played in the second half of a lot of games this season, I would include the UMHB game in there to really maintain the lead that they had. They held a shutout all the way until the final minute when UMHB scored very late. They're able to wear teams down, and that goes for both sides of the ball. And I think you watch them on film, and that's the thing that jumps out to me first and foremost. They got a ton of skill players, a lot of talent in the secondary and at linebacker. But what you see from the offensive and defensive lines is just something different. And that's what's allowed them to now ascend to being, the 5th ranked team in the country.
I agree 100%. In the war map that's coming out on Thursday, I talk about how that's the one area that I think UMHB has fallen off the most is on the offensive and defensive line play. And honestly, Hardin Simmons now reminds me of those national championship level UMHB teams on the line. But I will say the Cruz defense played the best game that I've seen from them all year, especially, and maybe the last 2 years. Last week, they were really impressive. That looked like a Mary Hardin-Baylor team of old. What have they done in the run game and in defensive fits since they lost to Hardin Simmons? Because the defense has really kind of buckled down. I know everybody likes to talk offense and the quarterback. I think it's all about that line of scrimmage, and that starts especially on that defensive side.
Yeah, it really does. And that's been the thing that I think watching them, especially coming out of the Hardin Simmons game, Larry Harmon talked that following Monday about how, this was such a sensitive time for them and things were going to really need to be, they were going to need to have a sense of urgency about them as they move forward and knowing that really their season was on the line from that point forwards. And I think we've seen that, but one of the biggest things from the defensive standpoint is they've finally gotten healthy. Brandon Magruder was, his very first week playing for the Crews, a junior college transfer, was selected to the D3football.com, team of the week. He had a huge performance against Bethel, but then he had gotten hurt and didn't play against Hardin Simmons. And Gage Sanders, who's also a defensive end starter, did not play either against the Cowboys. And so I think not having those two guys really had an effect, but then bringing them back and they were fully healthy really for the first time this past Saturday. And I think we saw their impact. They accounted for 5.5 of UMHB's 11 total tackles for loss. We're getting to the quarterback. Magruder had a big third down sack on a play in the second half. So those guys have made a huge impact. And so bringing them in and then also moving Gavin Brzezinski, who had played really well at safety, moving him down to the middle linebacker kind of role has made a huge difference. We saw that against Texas Wesleyan, and then we've seen it progressively in the weeks since. So some of those positional changes I think have and health, right, have really helped UMHB's defense to buckle down. But then I think also just schematically, they've had the talent all year, but now they're finally starting to get to that position where they're forcing turnovers. They forced fumbles in each of the last 3 games, I believe, had interceptions in each of those last 3 games. And that was the thing that UMHB's defense for so long prided itself on, was the ability to force turnovers, force short fields. And with their ability to do those things and then also get to the quarterback on third down, they've really started to look a little bit more like those defenses that we're used to seeing from them. And I think that the strength of schedule early on also benefited this defense to kind of open its eyes and figure out what they need to do exactly to get better, here in these later weeks.
Yeah, look, they're getting healthy at the right time, and they're not the only team. There's a few teams in Texas that had some injuries early in the season. Those guys are starting to come back, and it's a critical time for UMHB. For some teams, it's right as they're about to head to the playoffs. UMHB is not quite there yet. We're going to get to that in a minute. But I want to talk offense, defense. I feel like Hardin-Simmons has an edge in those two units. But if there's one unit where I think Mary Hardin-Baylor holds a clear advantage, it can take maybe some points and gain some momentum and turn some things around this week, it's special teams. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, how could you not, watch BJ Stewart returning those punts and kickoffs this past Saturday and not think, man, UMHB has something really, really special going here? Because, starting from week one, I think we saw what BJ Stewart could do. We saw him at Trinity years ago and what he did as a returner there. And we started to see that more and more. Honestly, UMHB is just the blocking scheme in front of him seems to have gotten a lot better. And then on top of that, his speed in agility and just the ability to kind of be very shifty as he kind of moves throughout a return is something pretty remarkable. And, I think we've seen so many talented returners on the field for the crew, looking back on those Stag Bowl runs, guys like Aaron Sims, KJ Miller really come to mind there. And he has some of those real attributes. You can see him in the way he returns. Obviously had a punt return and a kick return for a touchdown against ETBU. Also had a big punt return right to open the game up to about the 15-yard line, which set up UMHB for its first score. So I would agree that return game is going to be a huge priority, because if UMHB is going to get some momentum, if they're going to get some favorable opportunities against the Hardin-Simmons defense, it's going to need to start with that field position. And if he can, pick up a couple of big returns, who knows, right? You put your offense in a favorable spot a couple of times, they got some playmakers, and maybe we see UMHB stay in this game in large part because of its return game on Saturday.
Yeah, I think that's one area they flipped. Last year, Hardin-Simmons had the advantage in special teams. This year, it's Mary Hardin-Baylor. It's going to be big because now this is a playoff week for UMHB. That they lose this week, and I think all their playoff hopes are non-existent at that point. But to win the ASC, they have to win this game by 21 or more points. That is already difficult. How does that margin change kind of Larry Harmon's decisions in the first quarter and maybe second quarter when it comes to fourth and shorts and red zones, field goals versus touchdowns?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think, when you're looking at it at this situation, it's one that we don't see a lot because we don't see double round robin schedules very often in college football in general. And so I think, UMHB is in an interesting spot here, being that they not only have to win the game outright, but you're right, they have to win by 21 to really have a chance at the AAC title. And so I think early on in the first half, it's going to be a message of aggressiveness. We saw it this past Saturday against ETBU, obviously a very different caliber of defense than what they're going to see, on Saturday. And you got to be smart about the way you go and approach things. But I do think we're going to see that same level of aggressiveness and intensity coming out of the gate to go out and really try to, as you said, maybe extend some of these drives with keeping the offense on the field on fourth down, doing different things that may put the offense in a little bit of a position to score a few more points. I also think, too, it's going to depend a lot on how the defense is coming out in the first half and what we see from them. If they can figure out a way to hold Hardin-Simmons to, one score and a field goal or something along those lines, maybe that changes things a little bit as the game progresses. If UMHB can distance itself because of its defensive play, rather than having to, I don't think you get into a shootout with Hardin-Simmons and win by 21. I don't think that's a scenario that happens. So the defense is going to be important in that. I think based on that may dictate some of the way and also some of the matchups that UMHB is getting with its receivers on the outside. That's going to dictate some of the play calling and things they do. But, I don't have a good I don't know exactly the way that UMHB coaching staff is going to approach this, but I definitely think the point margin is going to be at the forefront of everyone's mind as that game's playing out.
It's very interesting to me because defensive head coaches are really risk averse, and Larry Harmon definitely fits that profile. how much does he have to overcome those urges to be a risk averse and take those risks this week, especially if they're up to 10 to 14 points in the third quarter. It's going to be an interesting thing to watch. So in the last few minutes, let's get to some of the playoff paths, starting with UMHB. If they lose this week or they win by less than 21, so they have no chance of getting the automatic bid, do they have a path to the playoffs?
I think it's going to be very, very, very slim to none at this point. You don't want to ever say it's completely out of the question. They did get in at 5-2 last year, but this is a different season. Teams are scheduled a little bit differently. Right now, Logan Hansen, who has done great work analytically on Division III football, has UMHB's Pool C odds at 0.5%. Now, with a Hardin-Simmons win and the quality win bonus and MPI, that may jump up a little bit. You never know what's going to happen on that last weekend of the season. But I do think that the Pool C odds, with the way things are currently going, and more importantly, Corey, this is a part that I don't think everyone realizes. UMHB only playing one non-conference game against a Division III, and that being UW-Whitewater, places a lot of impact on their MPI. Comes a lot from the way Whitewater has played. And unfortunately, this past weekend, Whitewater took a loss to River Falls. And that loss single-handedly almost, even with UMHB winning big against ETBU, that loss almost single-handedly pushed UMHB further down and outside of that Pool C picture than it did help them. If Whitewater finishes the season at 9-1, we might be talking about a different story, but now the best possible record for Whitewater is 8-2. And that's going to hurt UMHB's chances. So I think the priority is winning the AAC title at this point, because that's the real viable path, as slim as that seems, to getting in. And then we'll see what happens next week and the way different games play out.
I've got a playoff scenario coming out on Friday, and I look at that. Like, if they win by 21 or more, where do they have to go? And look, it's about a points versus the other teams thing, and I kind of break that down. It's I haven't fully written it yet because I want to make sure that I'm correct on it. But they need like ETBU to play Hardin-Simmons really close in the next in that last game is really, and then they have to take care of their business against Howard Payne as well. Those are the things we got to watch there. Okay. The SCAC, their championship game's coming up. We know Texas Lutheran is locked in. McMurry and Hendrix, who plays them in the title game?
Yeah, this is going to be, probably one of the more underrated games of the week nationally, right? Because you have this spot in the SCAC title game on the line. And both McMurry and Hendrix have been playing very well, I think, in terms of what we saw from them in the middle portion of the season. And then, you have for a couple tough breaks along the way, right? For both of these teams. Yeah. When you look at, McMurry had Hardin-Simmons on the ropes back early on and wasn't able to get that one done. Then they ended up, taking a couple of really difficult losses along the way as well. Yeah, the loss to Huntington, which, came final play of the game, pick six.
Yeah, that was a 94-yard pick six.
It was. And for as tough as that was, you look at the way Hendrix did, and they went and played TLU, lost 50-48. And the story behind that game is, Hendrix goes up with 27 seconds left. It's a go-ahead touchdown. It looks like they've won this game on the road, and then all of a sudden TLU finds a way to go 63 yards, wins it on the final play of the game. And so then that's another one that, for Hendrix, you'd really like to have that one back, right? You'd be looking at a different story heading to Saturday. But I think all in all, it shows that both teams are very capable. Now, what we saw from McMurray on Saturday against TLU concerns me a little bit. To only put up 13 points, the offense did not appear to be very much in rhythm at all. 3 interceptions there. Those are things you can't have if you're going to win on Saturday. And on the flip side of that, I think Hendrix is an offense that we've seen have the ability to really air the ball out, score a lot of points. Defensively is kind of the question. How do they match up? And what are they able to do, in a situation where they are on the road and they're going to need to, the pressures are going to be on, and McMurray's going to obviously be looking for a big bounce back. They didn't like the way they played on Saturday. I think they feel like they're a lot better than that. They have the pieces there to put up a lot more points than that against TLU's defense. So McMurry wants that rematch against TLU in Little Rock. Hendrix is obviously going to want their chance here in the first year of playing the SCAC to do so. And so I think this is going to be a really tight game. I honestly, I think McMurry has a little bit of an edge still, in my opinion, but Hendrix, with the way their offense is and their passing game in particular, I think it's going to keep them in a game. And if this turns into a shootout, you never really know, because, again, there's a lot of big play potential for this Hendrix offense with a senior quarterback, with a couple of 500-yard receivers. This is a matchup that really, really intrigues me on Saturday.
Listen, there's going to be a lot of turnovers. Football teams have a lot of turnovers,
Yep.
and they force a lot of turnovers as well on both sides. Dylan Plake, Jess Hole getting hurt, forced Dylan Plake into action, redshirt freshman. He done pretty well, but he really struggled against TLU. And so I think I give Hendrix an edge coming into this week, but I wouldn't be surprised to see McMurry and Jordan Neal figure out how to come back in that as well.
Yeah, McMurray's felt like they've been kind of on the cusp for a while this season. And, heading into this year, I kind of felt like McMurray was going to be that team that, gets into the playoffs. Obviously, they're going to need to do it with a Pool C. We saw TLU do it last year because the SCAC doesn't have an automatic bid right now. But, just a couple of results didn't go their way early. Then you have the injury, you're starting quarterback, and that's a lot of adversity that you have to overcome. And I think for the most part, again, McMurray's done a good job of that. Again, they have a head coach who is experienced in this, who's been in a lot of these moments in terms of, working with a team late in the season that is dealing with some injuries and some guys in different spots. And this is, again, I see this being a one-score game on Saturday when it comes down to it. These teams have been a bunch of close games already this season, and I think they find themselves in at least one more. I
think so too. All right. So again, we're going to couple of playoff scenarios. We're going to hit a couple teams. TLU, if they win the SCAC championship, they will have been undefeated throughout the entire conference schedule. Do they or any team in the SCAC actually have a Pool C shot still?
At this point, I think the chances are very, very limited. I don't think there's any Pool C chance really for TLU at this point, just because of some of the losses they picked up, early on, right? That's the hard part with the Pool C. You already have 3 losses. So, I don't think we see a 3-loss team get in. That's the hard part. If with an automatic bid, that's a different story. But when you're trying to contend with, a lot of these programs there, you have a lot of 2-bid leagues right now. And same thing that Mary Hart Baylor is facing, quite honestly. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of these power leagues. The WIAC is likely to send 2-3 teams in Pool C. So I think the SCAC champion, probably doesn't have at this point mathematically a Pool C shot, which, again, it's just a part of this situation with the SCAC not having an AQ, because normally, TLU would be talking about going to the postseason at this point.
Yeah, and look, SAA, that's another one that's a multi-bid league, at least 2. I don't know that they get 3. So here's the question. Barry looks like they're in for the most part. Trinity is right there. They're in a strong position, but they have Maryville left. Do they have to win out to get that Pool C? And does the SAA possibly sneak 3 teams in this year?
Yeah, the SAA surprised us a lot last year. And I think, for Trinity, you win your last 2 against Millsaps and Maryville, and you go 9-1. I think you're in. 8-2 would be a more interesting conversation. I think. Just again, there's going to be some 2-loss teams. The D3 this year has fewer undefeated teams at this point in the season than they've had in the last decade plus. Right? It's been a while since we've had so much, in a way, so much parity, right? When a lot of teams are playing tough non-conference games early, more losses are happening, less undefeated teams across the board. So there are going to be some 2-loss teams that get in. Trinity would put themselves pretty firmly on the bubble, I think, with 2 losses. I think from their mentality, I know Coach Urban is preaching this, winning out gives you, I think, the absolute best chance to get in at 9-1. And, even still, too, like with the way the SAA is set up, they kind of did this last year where we weren't really sure what was going to happen. And then all of a sudden last week of the season, Trinity obviously found its way in, and that gave the SAA a couple of Pool C bids, which was a surprise. But for the SAA right now, I think Trinity is the only team that really has a viable Pool C shot. Barry would obviously, if we were talking about them, maybe being on the bubble, but I think this is a 2-bid league this year coming out of that league.
Awesome. Well, that's Riley Zayas. I appreciate you so much for joining me. And Riley, before we let you go, tell people how to find you and where to find you, because you do outstanding work and have for years now. I
appreciate that, Corey. Yeah, you can find me on X at Zayas Riley. I'm always on there talking Division III sports. As you mentioned early on, Corey, managing editor of TrueToTheCrew.com. Really take a lot of pride in our coverage of UMHB athletics and coverage across the ASC. Then you can also find my newsletter on Division III women's basketball on Substack. Just search the Scoop on D3 Women's Hoops or D3 WBB Scoop.substack. And I'm available all those places and always happy to talk D3 sports with anyone that wants to reach out.
Hey, I can't recommend it enough, man. I really appreciate you joining us. It was a fun time.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me on, Corey.
Stay connected with me on Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and more. Just search at Corey Hogue Sports, CoryHogue Sports, and you can reach me directly by email at CoreyHogueSports@gmail.com. All right, this week's War Map, it is filled with meaningful contests. And remember, we roll with a 24-hour clock to honor my time as an Army combat medic. If the first two digits are greater than 12, subtract 1,200 for a 12-hour time. What I like to call what you normal people go with. Let's hit this week's War Map. All games are Saturday, November the 8th, and we're starting off with a doozy. 1,300 hours on UMHB All Access. Hardin-Simmons at Mary Hardin-Baylor. Since week 2, Hardin-Simmons has hammered teams by an average score of 52-15. And they have taken 4 of the last 5 in this rivalry. It's the most losses UMHB has eaten in any stretch of the rivalry since the Crew's earliest days. UMHB has answered with 3 straight victories since losing to HSU earlier, winning by an average margin of 44-17, and the number of points they've given up is trimming each week. The question is still up front. The Crew have given up 139.5 rushing yards per game. But last week, they looked like the old Crew, holding ETBU to 51 yards on 28 attempts, while running for 232 yards themselves. Let's flip back to the first meeting. Cowboys own the line of scrimmage, 215 rushing yards at 5.1 a pop, and held UMHB to 45 yards at 1.7 per carry. Every UMHB playoff path starts with a win here. And if they want to get into the American Southwest Conference Championship and the automatic bid, it starts with a victory by at least 21 points. They must win by 21 or more points to force into the ASC tiebreaker. HSU is chasing a 3rd straight conference crown. It's its best run since 98 to 2001. This is going to be a trench fight. Whoever controls the line wins. The edge is with the Cowboys, unless UMHB's renewed run game holds for 4 quarters. 1,300 hours on Flow College, another massive context. Hendrix at McMurry. It's the first ever meeting between these two teams, and it has high stakes on deck. Hendrix is 5-3, 3-1 in the Southern Collegiate Athletic Conference, and has stacked 2 straight wins since that 50-48 heartbreaker at TLU. The Warriors score 40 a game behind senior quarterback Jacob Bunniff, 2,583 yards and 24 touchdowns this year. McMurray's 4-game winning streak, it ended at against Texas Lutheran, and they lost quarterback Jess Hull earlier this year for the season. But redshirt freshman Dylan Blake stepped in. He's done admirably, 1,674 yards and 14 touchdowns in 7 games. He did struggle a bit last week, though, against the Bulldogs. Bottom line, expect points and little chaos. Both defenses allow 24 points plus per game. The two offenses have combined for 35 turnovers, and the defenses have forced 31 this year. The winner advances to the SCAC title game next week at War Memorial Stadium in Little Rock, Arkansas, with a shot at redemption against TLU. Hendrix is trying to win a championship in year one in the SCAC. McMurry wants those back-to-back titles before they leave and rejoin the American Southwest Conference. The difference is going to be who cashes the turnovers into touchdowns. 1,400 hours on the Antler Sports Network. We have Ottawa, Arizona at Texas Wesleyan. And for the fifth straight season, this rivalry is going to shape the Sooner Athletic Conference race. Ottawa took the first 4 in the series. The Rams have taken the last 2. Biggest margins, 16-point TxWes win in 2023, 14-point win for the Spirit in 2021. Everything else has been decided by a score or less. Ottawa is 7-0 this year, 6-0 in the league, and they are flattening folks, 45-7 on average. The Spirit allows 6.9 points per game. They haven't given up more than 14 in a game all season. The offense has only dipped below 38 points in a game once. Look, TxWes has a stronger schedule. They had trips to number 9, Lindsey Wilson. They played FCS upstart and fantastic story UTRGV. And they even traveled and played D3 Power Mary Hardin-Baylor. And they're Ottawa's first-ranked opponent of this season. The Rams are not last year's 57.5 points per game busts on offense. But they're still scoring 41 against NAIA teams. And the defense is allowing 22.3 to NAIA foes. The winner takes the SAC title and automatic bid to the NAIA playoffs. A Rams loss likely ends any at-large hopes. Ottawa could survive a close loss, but with no ranked pelts on the wall, the needle's thin. They would both whoever loses this will be on the bubble in a lot of ways. This game's going to hinge on the run game, turnovers, and late special teams. And that phase has bitten TxWes in tight finishes in recent years. It's going to be a good one. It's going to be with the Rams in their home stadium where they're used to playing. You don't want to miss that one. And we head on later in the afternoon. It's a very heavy afternoon slate, 1,500 hours on ESPN Plus Southeastern Louisiana at Lamar. And Southeastern hasn't lost to an FCS opponent. And they're burying people there 47-12. And somehow yet, the Lions are still seeking national respect week by week. Lamar just took its first FCS loss, a 24-17 defeat at UIW. Quarterback Robert Coleman's return didn't jumpstart the passing game. The Cards lean on a bruising rushing attack, 132 yards a game on the ground, but UIW bottled them up. Lamar's defense has been legitimate, allowing just 19 points per game to FCS foes, and it will need to be elite again this week. Lamar still controls its fate in the Southland, though. They beat SLU, and then they play SFA next week. They win those games, and the Cards take the title and the automatic bid. They split the next two, and now they're sweating the selection committee. The Lions can earn at least a share by winning out. That path is brutal. They've got Lamar, then at UIW, and then Nichols in the River Bell Classic at home. The red zone decides this one. Lamar scores touchdowns on 59% of its trips, but SLU scores touchdowns 72% of the time. Defensively, Lamar only allows touchdowns 60% of the time, and the Lions 70%. So the team that turns red zone trips into 7 points wins this game. We're staying at 1,500 hours on TSBN Sports, and it is a doozy here as well. Blinn at Cisco, and look, it wouldn't be the SWJC FC without some chaos in the final week of the regular season. Cisco has 2 paths to the playoffs, but both require help, and that help is Kilgore must beat Northeastern Oklahoma A&M in Miami, Oklahoma on Saturday. If they do, then these other scenarios start to go in for Cisco. As in, if Kilgore beats NEO and Cisco beats Blinn, Cisco is in. But if they don't, they end up tied at the same record with NEO. The NEO holds the head-to-head over Cisco. However, there's also another scenario of a three-way tie for that fourth seed, and that's if NEO and Cisco lose and New Mexico Military knocks off Navarro. The Wranglers would sneak in then because the tiebreaker goes their way. First job, they got to handle Blinn. They defeat Blinn, sets them up well. And then they got to be fans of the Rangers up in Miami, watching that out-of-town scoreboard. And finally, the only night game that is here, it is a huge one as well, 1,800 hours. Watch it on Flow College. It's Western Oregon at Angelo State. Western Oregon can clinch the Lone Star and the D2 auto bid by beating Angelo State and then Central Washington in back-to-back weeks. The skepticism, though, centers on the climb. It's a long road trip to San Angelo, and then CWU is a team that appears a tier above the rest of the conference. For Angelo State, this is a must-win to keep the playoff window cracked open. The Rams were on the bubble before last week's loss to CWU, but that loss doesn't tank them in Super Region 4. The path is pretty simple. Beat Western Oregon, beat West Texas A&M on the road, and let the committee sort that out. Maybe there's a little bit of craziness in some of these other conferences in Super Region 4. Expect urgency from Angelo State's front seven early and often. If they squeeze WOU's early downs and keep this in the low to mid-20s, the Rams have the fourth quarter formula. If WOU's run game travels, the Wolves can slam the door on the league. That is your weekend warm map. Trenches are going to decide HSU, UMHB. Turnovers are deciding Hendrix and McMurray. Special teams loom large for Ottawa and TxWes. In the Southland, it's all about that red zone math. For SLU and Lamar, always chaos in the JUCO ranks in Cisco, of course, and playoff pressure in San Angelo. I'll have notes, post-game reactions on my Substack, so stay locked in there. I want to thank you for joining me for this week's episode of the Cut Block Podcast. Going to be back with another episode soon, bringing you more unfiltered truth and fearless football talk. Until then, stay safe. And remember, just because it's legal doesn't make it right. Just like my takes.
Thank you for listening to the Cut Block Podcast with Corey Hope. Remember, the cut block might be legal, but that doesn't make it right. Just like Corey Hope's takes.